Today, my presentation will focus on data collection. So I think, as Natalie mentioned it, and I think you have discussed this a lot also yesterday, we are here to talk about monitoring, and I think we all know why we need to monitor. So today I'm just going to focus on how do we collect the data along the plastic value chain. So I'm going to share with you some feedbacks on previous and ongoing projects in the region and share good practice and case studies related to data collections. I've put this cartoon because sometimes when you're trying to get a bit of like an understanding of how waste management and system works, it feels like sometimes like a detective. You're really trying to find out what's going on with the waste around here. So coming back to the plastic value chain, I think this is something that we need to all have in mind, is that like plastic value chain is quite complex. It involves a lot of stakeholders, very different stakeholders. And we have also the complexity being enhanced by the fact that we are not only talking about plastic, but plastics. So there's so many there's a lot of different plastics. And if we look at this plastic value chain, looking at how much plastic is being generated, how much plastic is being collected, how much is leaking into the environment, but also how much is being recycled, you're not going to have the same plastic value chain if we are talking about PET or if we are talking about PE or any other type of plastic. So I think we have to bear that in mind while we are moving on data collections and monitoring. We have to keep this in our mind. Natalie, I think you had a like nicer diagram than I have, and mine is also like very hard to read. But I would say, like as an engineer, this is the type of thing that we would like to have at the end. So really understanding, okay, how much plastic is being generated, how much plastic waste is put out, is being generated. Sorry, how much is being collected, how much is going to recycling. So this is the type of thing that we want to have in the end. But to have that, we need to collect data. And particularly at the national level, this is also something that I believe it's quite important, is that if we want to build this kind of understanding at the national level, we need to look also at the local level and take into account the diversity in one country on how waste is managed. You won't have like the same kind of system in rural areas versus urban areas, for example. So what do we want to monitor and why? So I'm going to focus mainly today in this presentation on the waste collection side and on the plastic recycling side. I think you have talked a lot yesterday on like the leakage into the environment. I'll touch upon like very quickly, but let's focus on this part. One point as well is that whatever tools or methodology that we are going to use to try to model this kind of like plastic cycle, there's some basic data that we need to have to really understand what's going on there, and this is on what we are going to focus on. So waste generation, how much waste is being generated in our countries. We know that like waste generation is usually estimated based on surveys and characterization. And some of the challenges that we face when we are trying to get around how much plastic waste is being generated is that you've got non-coordinated studies and survey done on project basis, non-harmonized characterization studies that have been made. Also highlighting the difficulties in monitoring the waste generated by commercial and industrial activities. Some feedback from some field surveys that we have carried out is that, especially when looking at plastic, I'm coming back to my first point, is that you need to know what type of plastic we are talking about. So just a quick feedback is that like, it's very important to train the people that are going to do like the data collection, so they know like what we are talking. So is this bottle made of PET or PE or PS or whatever? Otherwise, like the result that you're going to get are going to be useless. And also characterization protocol is quite important. I think you have talked, Natalie, a lot yesterday about like harmonizing data as well, and like having methodology protocols when we are doing some surveys help not only to harmonize the data, but also to know what has been done on the ground to collect the data and make adjustments, so you're counting apple with apples. Some good practices that we have seen around some case studies. We have come upon on a previous project in Bhutan. They have done this very nice national characterization study at the national level. They have done an amazing work looking at like a lot of different cities across the country, looking in rural area, urban areas, and like applying the same methodology at the national level. And they came up with like this very big report, but super nice to have on like what type of waste is being generated across the country. And I think this kind of example is quite inspiring. Want to highlight, for example, as well, like the work that has been done in the Philippines, in Manila, where like a big characterization campaign has been done, where you can gather a lot of information. So this is the type of initiative and good practice that help in understanding the work that we are, like this plastic value chain and how to improve it. Oh, sorry. So moving forward, so when this waste has been generated, we need to manage it. And looking at how it's being managed, it's also kind of a challenging exercise. We face different issues when we are trying to say, okay, so you have waste around, how much is being collected, where is it being sent to? You face here some issues related to monitoring policy. So how do we monitor this type of quantity and type of waste? But also like basically monitoring equipment, like if you don't have like a weigh bridge at the landfill site, so it's quite difficult to know how much waste is being collected. I think it's also important, and I'll touch upon on the importance of the informal sector. So we have also informal players along this plastic value chain that are here, and basically it's even like harder to get information on like how much is being collected and how much is being recycled by them. But also you have also some private actors that are here along the plastic value chain, and there might be sometimes some reluctance to sharing data. So I think one thing to get on this one is like data exists. It's sometimes like quite difficult to get hold on it. So and it's usually not consolidated nor harmonized. And here I want to highlight the very important role of the local government and like working at the local level, because as we discussed here today, and we are going to discuss further today, is like it's important that we can consolidate it, that we can consolidate data to have this view also at the national level. So working at a very small local scale help like really understand things. I would also highlight one good practice as well that we came across in various countries. Is like population census are like a very powerful tool when it includes some waste management data in it. It really helps to have an overview and long-term trends in terms at the country scale on waste management practices, and it really helps also to have a very granular level of analysis at the national level. Moving forward on plastic recycling, so this is like the end goal. We really would hope that like all plastic collected will end up like being recycled. Here I would say like the challenge is in getting some information related to plastic recycling. It's not so much about like how much is being collected, because usually like this is weighted, like at this point we are weighting the plastic, because if it's going to recycle it has value. But the information is rarely shared, and it's like really hard as well to get hold on. Also one of the challenges that we have is whereas waste management is like really at the local level, when we are talking about recycling, it can be like in a more wider geographical area. So for example, if we are talking, we are doing some work in Cirebon city, in Indonesia, for example, and we are looking at like the plastic that is being collected in Cirebon. It can end up like being recycled in Jakarta or in Surabaya or so on. So when looking at like what is going on there, you have to zoom up and look at like also all the recyclers across the country. So you need to look at like downstream but also upstream, looking at like the recycling information. Also some, I would say, like good practice is to work along the chain. So as I mentioned, like looking at like, okay, where is this waste going to, and having this on both, looking at it on both sides, but also as kind of good practice. There's some work that can be done, like working with the Recyclers Association. It can be useful because through this kind of association, recyclers are maybe more like willing to share some information, some data, and work along with like the other stakeholders in like understanding the value chain here. As mentioned before, also like the informal sector is like key today in when we are talking about plastic waste management. And by definition, the informal sector, it's not registered, so it's really hard to quantify its role. But we all know that like its role is very, very important. So I definitely encourage like looking very hard on this part of the value chain, and looking at like the different steps as well, because the informal sector can be involved at the collection, but also sorting and recycling of the plastics. So looking at how to identify the informal sector, so there's different approach on the ground to get connection. So you can start talking with one waste speakers and like, you know, go along and trying to figure it out along the value chain. Also, I like to highlight like also the role of local NGOs that are working with the informal sector, but also local authorities, because usually local authorities are also well aware of like what's going on there. So I think this is why I was mentioning about like doing a detective work, is that like you really need to find where is the waste going to. In terms of good practices to look at, the acknowledgement and registration of the informal collectors are a good step to help in understanding like the role, the quantity, and the type of plastic that they are collecting and recycling. Also, association and cooperative of waste pickers are also like good example of work that can be done to really get into how much waste they are collecting. I'm talking about how much and like the type, because like engineering background, I like to count. But highlighting here that when we are looking at like the informal sector, there's more than just counting how much plastic waste they are collecting. We also need to look at on the social aspects, like the working condition, gender related aspect as well. Because when we are going to explore this, it's not only about building and understanding the plastic value chain, but it's also on how do we improve it. And having those data would be also like very key on like how do we improve the role, their working condition, and how do we, in the end, like really improve this plastic value chain. I think I'm gonna like go very quickly on this one. I think you have discussed a lot. Just mentioning that also when doing, you know, field survey, looking at like plastic pollution, you you can look at it like from a theoretical approach, like trying to estimate how much plastic is leaking into the environment. But also when you are doing some field surveys, like interviewing waste pickers, interviewing like local government on waste management, it's really also important to look at like plastic pollution on the field, because it can help. I've put an example of like, if you find out in a city some places where you have a lot of plastic pollution, you have hotspot of plastic, you can also investigate here on like what are like the causes of those of this plastic pollution, understanding like at the local level what have led to this hotspot. So is it like a waste collection issue? Is it some waste coming from elsewhere? Why is it accumulating at this point? Is there anything that we can do to clean up? Or what should we do to improve the overall system so we avoid this leakage over there? So combining the theoretical and the field approach is quite, I would say, important. Just going very quickly on that, because I think I have a bit of more time. But I don't have a microphone anymore. So yes, thank you. So just wanted to highlight the work that Sareka is doing in Cirebon in Indonesia. So we are building at the moment a baseline study on understanding of how plastic waste is being managed at the city level. So we have put up this kind of big diagram and methodology, but basically coming back to what I've mentioned. So trying to map the plastic waste flow, so really understand how things are moving along. And I've put up here the way we have did it. So we have looked at secondary data, of course, like data existing around, but also spending a lot of time with like local stakeholders, discussing with like the local authority of Cirebon City to understand like how waste management collection is organized at the local level, but also discussing with the stakeholders, the informal sector in particular, to try to assess their role and the quantity of plastic they're collecting. But also, and this is what I mentioned in the last slide, also looking at, okay, where do we have plastic waste hotspot? Like really trying to understand, like, okay, why is plastic leaking into the environment? And looking back at like the plastic value chain and the plastic flow, where can we improve this plastic management? And some of the results, so we are finalizing the plastic waste flow analysis, also looking at like the different type of facility that exist. So we have put up this map, for example, with like TPST, so kind of collection center around. So it helps us, for example, here to see like some area where there's no or less collection infrastructure there. But also getting some information related to waste pickers activities. You have some example here on like where are the waste pickers collecting waste. So you can also, with this kind of data as a baseline, trying to build on like how do we improve it later on, and like the type of plastic, for example, that is being collected. So it helps also understand, okay, which plastic has value, which plastic has less value, and therefore like helping and building recommendation in terms of infrastructure, in terms of management, but also in terms of policies. As a conclusion, I would say like that monitoring is essential to globally improve plastic management from its production to its recycling or safe disposal. That implementing a culture of data collection and reporting at the local and national level and ensuring data reliability is key to improve the monitoring and finally reduce plastic pollution. Also, but I think this is something that we'll touch upon later on today, is like digital solution can be a powerful tool to support the data collection process and its analysis. Definitely, because I mean, I've been talking about collecting a lot of data today, so it's really nice to can put this around in spreadsheet in the end. But like digital solutions are just a tool, and they would need to be supported by strong institutional and regulatory framework and increased capacity as well to make sure that those data are collected in an harmonized way and that they are also gathered together to make sense also at the national level. Thank you very much.